Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Oh.
Jayam Vishnupad Padaman Sukadi Rajakacharya Jasto to the Satashi Shimad AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Raj Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Nama Acharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Mai Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Gaur Premanande.
Hare Hare Bol.
Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you for those who've come. And thank you to Kendra Prabhu for agreeing to co-host, which means help with the practicalities here. And obeisances and my respects to all who've come, especially Duka Hantri Dasi, my god sister. And let's jump in. In this seminar, which is of indeterminate length, we don't know how long we'll go, I have my plan is, first of all, to give a little general discussion about the Vanaprastha ashram, what it is, why we want it, and so on. And to talk especially about practicalities of the Vanaprastha ashram. How do you do it? It's the unseen ashram in ISKCON. We see lots of grahastas. We still see some brahmacharis. There's some sannyasis with high visibility, but very few in the way of vanaprasthas. So what does a vanaprastha do? Even in our history, ISKCON's history, or the history of the Sampradaya, it may be difficult to see what do vanaprasthas do, and especially today, what does a vanaprastha do? How do we apply this in our lives? Should we choose to do so? And should we choose to do so? So these are some of the questions. I especially would like to invite people to share their experiences, share their concerns and questions, share practical questions that have occurred to you or that you may be facing, so that we can broaden our understanding, be aware of some of the issues that people face in their lives, which is what this is about, in regard to retirement and the retired order. And I'll try to be nice. I'll try not to shut people down or pontificate or heavy people out. If I'm getting overbearing, someone can send me a note and say, Maharaj, you're too much. But my intention is really to hear and try to be helpful. And I hope that from this also we'll get some ideas that we can spread to the larger ISKCON community. The discussion can overflow a bit beyond those of us who are here. Okay, and the same ground rules apply here that apply in our Monday, Wednesday, and Friday programs. Feel free at any time to jump in with a question or a comment or a question or a comment. If you can just jump in, unmute yourself, which you're able to do, or raise your hand, which you can do, or physically raise your hand. You're welcome to do that. There's no, I'm happy to be, to keep this going and not just have a long lecture with a question and answer period at the end. And we'll go till 8 o'clock, that's our schedule. And we won't run over because we have other programs that start at 8. So we'll try to stop a little shy of 8 o'clock so that people can jump off and jump on again. And you can remind me, Kendra, also when it gets to
sound.
Ajay Prabhu, welcome. Hare Krishna. Okay. Sorry. From Orange County. Okay. Everyone is muted. Yes, everyone is muted, but everyone can unmute themselves, I trust, right? We have that.
Yes.
Checked. I think that people can unmute themselves.
Yes.
Okay. And my screen takes up too much space, so it sort of prevents me from seeing everything else. But I'll try to adjust that.
He has to do it himself.
Okay, there we go. That's how to do it.
So you sent me the link?
No, I couldn't.
Okay. So in a larger picture, it's interesting. We've all, Prabhupada, when he began the Krishna consciousness movement, and for many years, in fact, he really didn't focus on Varnashram. He talked about it, certainly, he wrote about it, but at some point he famously said that I've only completed half my mission, the other half is to establish Varnashram. And at a certain point in ISKCON, it was interesting, we started hearing a lot about Varnashram, Varnashram. We need to pay more attention to Varnashram. And my impression at the time, which I don't think was wrong, was that it meant we have to give more attention to householder life. Because at that time, the society was at least predominantly brahmacharis and sannyasis. They were the most visible and active group. But there were lots and lots and lots of householders. And so Varnashram, which meant, what about us? And where do we fit in? And so on. And I don't hear much jumping up and down these days saying, Varnashram, Varnashram. because now many of those householders are in their 60s, they're even 70 or so on. And Varnashram now means something very different. Varnashram now means something very different. Now, that said, my ears may be just pointed in the wrong direction, or I may just be overly cynical because I'm getting as old as everybody else. So such explanations are entirely possible. But I wanted to give some sense of the importance of Varnashram in this way, that if we're that Varnashram covers the territory of our lives from childhood to youth to old age. There's a life cycle. First of all, biologically, there's a life cycle. You look at the pictures of ourselves when we were young, those of us who no longer are, and you look at what would be, I guess, your Facebook timeline or something, and there you are, changing bodies over the course of the decades. So, and we feel different, we think differently, we have different duties and responsibilities, different concerns, just by the nature of time. Time changes, and we're meant to change with it. So the Varnashram, first of all, isn't Krishna consciousness. Krishna consciousness is something else. Krishna consciousness is love of Krishna. It's having the mind full of Krishna. So Varnashram alone is different from Krishna consciousness. And for Krishna consciousness, we just have to chant Hare Krishna, hear and chant about Krishna, and steep our minds in remembrance of Krishna. So Varnashram is different, but Varnashram supports Krishna consciousness. Varnashram gives the supportive environment for Krishna consciousness. We have to live in some sort of social setup, and the modern materialistic social setup is not conducive for Krishna consciousness. It has no interest in Krishna consciousness, or very little interest in Krishna consciousness. It's not meant, it doesn't aim at fostering Krishna consciousness. Perhaps it sometimes makes, in some circles, has some claim to promoting religious values or religious life, and in some communities, there's more of a definite sense of that. And there's even a system or a set of expectations. But it's certainly not the prevailing atmosphere of America or Europe. And the Vedic literature gives a prescription or a recipe for how to live our life in such a way that our life and our society will be conducive for the development of Krishna consciousness. So the Varnashram is meant for that, to help us, to provide a useful and healthy context for our spiritual life, rather than an ad hoc, haphazard, and sometimes antagonistic or counterproductive context. You can say a purposeful context, rather than a context which is purposeless or which has wrong purposes, bad purposes. All right. This has to do not only with a general sense of promoting Krishna consciousness, but okay, biologically. So we have the brahmacharya ashram. We know that from the beginning of life, the child should be trained in such a way as to enable him or encourage him or her to become Krishna conscious. Then there's family life, in which we want to have a grahastha ashram, which is, again, conducive to Krishna consciousness. And of course, the concerns and the life of the grahastha are very different from those of the brahmachari. The responsibilities are different, the way of life is different. But as we age, then the Vanaprastha life becomes important, and Prabhupada says, in fact, essential. My contention would be that without retired life, how are we really different from the materialistic society? If our life is really a life of where we don't go beyond the family circle, how is that so much different from the ordinary materialistic life? Of course, we can have a family life that's Krishna conscious, that's no doubt. So certainly that difference is there. But our social system is meant to be quite radical, or quite radically different. I won't say quite radical, quite radically different from that kind of, from the kind of life where we just stay in the family circle till the end of our days. It's meant for detachment. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself came to teach Vairagya Vidya, Nija Bhakti Yoga, devotional service along with spiritual knowledge and detachment. So if we don't develop spiritual knowledge or we don't develop detachment, then we don't have the full picture. We may have Nija Bhakti Yoga, devotional service, but that devotional service really wants to have or deserves the support of spiritual knowledge and spiritual detachment. These are healthy, these are congenial, these are supportive, these are important even for Bhakti Yoga. In one sense, Bhakti Yoga is independent. It doesn't depend on anything else. You don't have to have vidya even. You can just love Krishna. But if we're practicing Krishna consciousness, if we're not blessed with spontaneous love of Krishna, then knowledge will help us and be virtually essential, and vairagya will help us. So the Vanaprastha ashram is meant for vairagya, or it's the beginning of vairagya. I'm not going to talk a lot about sannyas in this seminar, because sannyas is something else again. Sannyas is forbidden in Kali Yuga. That's a separate discussion. And anyway, discussion of sannyas, if we're here talking about Vanaprastha life, is premature. People may take sannyas at some later stage, or some people may jump into sannyas at an earlier stage. But that's not our concern here. That's not our subject matter. Our concern is for those who've entered the grahastha life, spent a good many years there, and now see or might hope to see what comes next. That's our focus. That's our focus. And sannyas we'll talk about later. That can be a separate seminar or a separate discussion. Of course, we touch upon it just as we'll touch upon brahmachari life or other topics. But our focus here really is not on sannyas, it's on the third stage of life, the retired life, or Vanaprastha. Now, I should say that Prabhupada's books are full of discussions about the importance of the Vanaprastha ashram. Not packed from end to end, because there are more important things, as we've discussed, than just varnashram. But practically, you won't pick up a book where you won't find mention of the varnashram system And certainly you can't get from one end of Srimad Bhagavatam to the other without finding multiple places where Srila Prabhupada talks about retiring from family life and talks explicitly about the Varnashram Dharma. I'll stop here just for a bit and pause, let's say, and see if there's some questions or comments so far.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Tulsi Priya has a question.
Okay, then Tulsi Priya has to mute her phone.
Okay, I'll speak from here. Okay, I wish I had had time to look this up, but I only thought of the question now. I remember reading at least a couple of times in one particular location where Prabhupada conflates Varnashram Dharma with Sanatan Dharma. He basically says Varnashram Dharma is Sanatan Dharma or vice versa.
Many places.
Yeah. And I was just wondering, what if you're saying it's a support, but I kind of feel like I understand what he means when he says it's the same, but I would like some explanation or expansion on that from you,
Good.
please.
We see Sanatan Dharma in Prabhupada's books as being mentioned as essentially synonymous with Varnashram Dharma. But elsewhere, I think this is implicit in your question, elsewhere we see that Sanatan Dharma is the eternal engagement of the living entity. It's what the soul eternally does. That's Sanatan Dharma. So what's going on here? My understanding would be that it's one of those words that's being used in two different ways. And the two ways are related. They're related, which can add to the confusion in one sense, but they're different. So Sanatan Dharma in one sense means that engagement, that dharma, that duty, which is eternal, as the living entity is eternal. And Srila Prabhupada explains that in the introduction to Bhagavad Gita, as it is, among other places, that a person may serve this person or that person or another person, but we have to serve. And so service is the actual dharma of the living entity. As sugar's dharma is to be sweet, as chili's dharma is to be hot, the living entity's dharma is to serve. And that service is meant to be eternally reposed in Krishna. Now I'm serving my country, my family, my dog. That's not Sanatan. But to serve Krishna is the Sanatan Dharma of the living entity. So that's one meaning. Another meaning, which you've picked up, is essentially Varnashram. The Prabhupada sometimes even says that the real religion of India is Sanatan Dharma. Not Hinduism, but Sanatan Dharma. Then what is Sanatan Dharma? Sanatan Dharma in that context is the system of 4 occupational sections and 4 social, 4 spiritual sections. Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas, and Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. These, as it said, the warp and the woof of a cloth, it's defining what the cloth is. So these 8 intersections, or 2 sets of 4 intersecting divisions, forms the framework or the cloth, the tapestry of human life. If we follow the Vedic Shastras, we're going to be following Varnashram. Varnashrama charvata purushena parapuman. Vishnu rajyate panta nandita toshakam. So even the Mayavadis, even the Shaivites, whatever, all the different sections of the so-called Hindu religion or the Vedic culture, accept this Varnashram Dharma. And this is our system for organizing human society and for organizing our life. So in that sense, Sanatan Dharma and Varnashram Dharma are synonymous terms. But in another sense, Sanatan Dharma and and Krishna Bhakti are synonymous terms. So there are two different ways of using Sanatana Dharma. And of course, this Sanatana Dharma is supposed to support that Sanatana Dharma. They're different meanings, but related meanings. The Varnashram is supposed to support devotional service or spiritual development culminating in devotional service. Is that all right?
Thank you. Yes.
Anything else here as we go along?
There's one comment from Adya Prabhu. Adya
Yes.
Prabhu, can you unmute yourself and make your comment?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandan Pranam, all glory to Prabhupada.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, last month I became 73.
Yes.
I'm seeing the exit sign.
Yes.
So it is, funny thing is for last month, 1 month, I've been discussing and getting into how do I get into Vanaprastha. I'm already in Vanaprastha. How do I, throughout the life, we have been doing devotional service, so I'm okay with that. But I feel Dharma I have done. Taking care of family, taking care of making money, taking care of children, getting them married. I think I'm done with them. But now it's Param Dharma. That is my soul. Now what I have to do.
Exactly. You're almost the poster boy for the eligible candidate for Vanaprastha. You're, for those who don't know, Ajay Prabhu, who's earlier from from Gujarat and then from New York. He's spent his whole life really in Krishna consciousness. He has three grown children who are all doing well. He's has a successful life in business. He's been involved with, he and his wife, with temple service for forever and ever, serving the Vaishnavas and doing wonderful devotional life. But now, as he says, he's 73. So now he's packed in his business, handed that over to his eldest son. So now where are we going from here? That's the question. And there's quite a community of devotees who are in this exact situation. They're older, they've done very fine devotional service, but now what am I supposed to do? What's next? What's my program? What's the next thing? Or putting it more forcefully, how do I make the most progress now? What can I do to really move down the line in devotional service, especially since time is running out? And that becomes more and more evident to us at this age, that as it was running out for Parikshit Maharaj, of course, with a very clear countdown, we know that it's running out for us also. So it's becoming not just a relevant question, but an urgent question. What do I do before time's over? There's a, like on those music players, what is it, time remaining? So how much, and that number goes down and down and down. So we don't know how much time is remaining, so what do we do? So thank you.
Your email was so timely. I was going through this Param Dharma now. I would forget about Dharma. Now it's only Param Dharma, is my soul and Krishna, and detached from everything. And I was wondering, and then your email comes. So this is all arrangement of Srila Prabhupada and Krishna. I'm so thankful, Maharaj, for your email.
Thank you, Ajay Prabhu, your kindness.
I'm looking forward to my next life, next chapter.
Next chapter. Apurva Prabhu has a question.
What did you have? What did you send him in that email?
I just sent the
Info.
link. Yeah, just said we're going to be here at this time and at this place, and you're welcome to come. It's an invite. Now, in fact, I'll tell you what. While we're at it, I'll cut and paste that that invite onto, oops, I'll open it first. Onto the chat box. And everyone here is free to
see yourself big screen?
No.
to share that with all of your friends and relatives and so on. In the chat box is the invitation, and you can just copy it and paste it into your favorite email client and invite others who might be interested. We will be going every Thursday at this time, 7 o'clock. And that's the invite. I could have added more information about what we'll be talking about, but I just, okay, let me get it out there. Just sent out the directions how to get here.
Actually, Vanaprastha word got me right in it. So
Excuse me?
The word Vanaprastha in your email was exactly what hit me solid. And I said, yes, this is what I'm looking for. So,
and we're calling it the Vanaprastha adventure, because really that's what it is.
Yes.
And I mean it to be in the sense of an adventure, something that's has some element of the unknown in it, but is exciting, and we expect it to be rewarding. It's not just a get up tomorrow morning and straighten your tie and have your cup of coffee and go off to work. Now there's an adventure here. So that's the theme. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what is that? Jayosmi Vyavasayosmi, 10th chapter. He says that I'm adventure. Let's see. Yeah, I think maybe that's probably translates Jayosmi Vyavasayosmi. That when there's an adventure, an undertaking, something with risk in it, even adventure implies there should be a little risk. So that's also a representative of Krishna, of Krishna. Then Bhattu Gopal asks, although Vanaprastha life is after the age of around 50, but shouldn't we be planning for it since the time we enter Grahastha ashram so that it's an easy change? Well, actually we should be planning for it, or someone should be planning for it for us, planning it for us from the very beginning. The brahmachari life is meant to prepare us for for progress on the road of varnashram. The brahmachari may stay brahmachari or go directly to sannyas. Most often, the brahmachari will get married, and that brahmachari life is the preparation for his married life. These days, we see too often that serious brahmachari life is neglected or sort of set aside as impractical or not doable. And we sort of drift over to an ordinary sort of life in which we go to school, we get married, we get a career, and where we don't have that training. Dasan, what is that? Brahmachari Guru Kule, Vasantanta Guru Arhita. The brahmachari life is meant for learning how to control the senses, how to control the mind, how to live for the service of the spiritual master, how to become a humble servant, how to become probably a person of character, and how to develop that strong Krishna consciousness. Because with that strong Krishna consciousness, when I enter the Grahastha life, then I've got some substance there. The husband is supposed to be the spiritual master of the wife. Now he has some credit with which to fulfill that role. The wife is supposed to be an inspiration in Krishna consciousness. If she's been trained nicely at home, she's qualified to fulfill that role. So that the preparation for Vanaprastha life and sannyas life and the end of life, antakale chamameva, smaran muktva kalevara, yaprayati samadbhavam, yati, nastyatra sanshaya. Someone remembers Krishna at the end of life, goes back home, back to Godhead. That's the goal. That's the goal of human life. Ante Narayana Smriti. To remember Narayan, to remember Krishna. That's the goal that we want to reach before the man blows his whistle and the game's over. We want to reach that goal. So that begins in the very beginning, even before brahmacharya life, at the time of conception. The Prabhupada said the Garbhadhan Samskara, or in ISKCON he's advised that the parents should chant 50 rounds of the Maha Mantra and surcharge their minds with Krishna consciousness with the intention of getting good Krishna conscious children. So it begins there. During pregnancy, the parents are to be, the mother especially, to be hearing transcendental sound. Shukadeva Goswami was hearing from the womb Krishna consciousness. Prahlad Maharaj was hearing transcendental instructions from within the womb. So even before the beginning of life, this preparation for the end of life is in view in the Vedic culture. Then the child is born, and everything is done to try to surround the child with a Krishna conscious atmosphere. Even in Islam, I was talking with one teacher, Islamic teacher, and he was saying that we say that from the breast of the mother, the child should be hearing the name of Bismillah, the name of God. So we're in agreement. And so this is the idea, that always from the very beginning of life to be hearing about Krishna, or Prabhupada's case, he raised me as a Krishna conscious child. Prabhupada dedicated the Krishna book to his father. He raised me as a Krishna conscious child. So the child is to be raised in Krishna consciousness. Then Grahastha ashram is there. And in the Grahastha ashram, planning should be there. And that will be part of our discussion also. If we know that that there's going to be an end to the Grahastha ashram, if we know that we're going to be leaving the Grahastha ashram, then we should be making our plans to leave. And of course, we don't expect that on your wedding day, your thoughts are going to be surcharged with plans for for going to the forest. But this is part of the overall plan. And even we know that Karda Muni said, yes, I'll accept your daughter until the son is born. And then the forest. So the plan was there from early on. And those who are entering married life should know that we're going to be married for some years, and then we'll be moving on to the next stage. This is just as we know that I'm going to be young for a while, and then after a while I'll be old. So that should be planned for, just as in an organization, a corporation, whether it's profit or non-profit, we make plans for succession. In our personal life, we make wills, we have insurance for our old age and so on. So we make plans. We don't say, we save up money and wealth management funds. So we should be planning how to get out of the Grahastha ashram and move on to the next ashram during our family life. That will make it, that will benefit, that was a point I wanted to make. It will benefit it will inform our Grahastha life. If our Grahastha life is uninformed by the prospect of Vanaprastha life, it will tend not to be quite on course. If I don't know where I'm going next, or if I think I'm not going anywhere else next, then what I do now is going to be a little bit aimless or off course, or just not completely clear. But if I know definitely that I'm going to be here for a while, and then I'll be there, you know, as Google Maps, I'm starting at this point and I'm ending at that point. So if I know that, if I know where I'm going, and I have some expectation that, you know, in 45 minutes you'll reach your destination, or 25 years, then I plan. I know, I can look, how far along am I? And how do we make sure that we're moving toward our goals? So that kind of planning. And that informs how we bring up our children also. If the son knows that after some time you'll be taking care of your mother, that changes things for the child, doesn't it? There's a difference between being brought up and thinking, wow, when you're 18, you'll have your own flat and you'll be on your own. There's a difference from that and knowing that when you're 25 or so, you're going to be taking care of your mom. Or when you're 35 or so, you'll be taking care of your mom. Let's say child is born when I'm 25 or so. All right, so when you're 50, but earlier, really, that idea should be there. So that informs the life of the son also, that you have responsibilities. We've done what we've been able to do for you, but as a responsible human being, you have duties to perform. You'll be a grahastha. Grahastha means responsibilities. So the grahastha models this responsible life, partly for his own spiritual progress and partly to instruct the next generation also, his own family members and the others in society, that here are the duties that we all are meant to take seriously. And they may be implemented in different ways, and we'll talk about that. There's a lot of flexibility in the Varnashram, in the Vanaprastha ashram. But taking it seriously definitely helps us shape our lives and plan our lives so that they'll be meaningful. And they'll help, and that our progress will be steady toward that goal of making further progress. Apurva Prabhu, you didn't get to finish your question. Oh, Apurva.
Sorry. That there should be support of spiritual knowledge and spiritual detachment. So could you say more about what that spiritual detachment is?
The spiritual detachment, of course, is detachment from aham mameti, from thinking that I'm this body, from thinking that which is related to this body is mine, to be free from identifying with the gross body, with the subtle body, and then with the extensions of this body, or in the form of wife, especially, children, home, possessions, extended family members. This is the griha, kshetra, sutta, apta, vittai. These are the usual items mentioned as objects of detachment. The home, the property, children, relatives, and in the beginning, the wife. So these are all objects of detachment. And detachment also means or implies attachment. We're not just interested in Falgu Vairagya or dry renunciation, but we're interested in attachment to Krishna. We don't want to be like the dry Mayavadis, just detached and, as it said, dry like oil cakes without the oil. So we want to be juicy. We want to be full of the juice of Krishna consciousness. That kind of detachment, detached from the material world because we're experiencing a better world. Raso Vardram Rasopyasya Param Drishtra Nivartate. So that's there. But especially just in a straightforward, simple answer, detachment means especially detachment from life. The strongest attachment is, what is that? Pumsastriya Maitinam Pavameti. Tayor Mito Hridiya Grantamahu. This is the knot that develops. A strong attachment between husband and wife, or between male and female. So even in Krishna consciousness, in family, in the Krishna conscious family life, there's an attachment that develops. Otherwise, why did we become grahastas if there's no attachment? We could have stayed brahmacharis, saved ourselves so much money, saved ourselves so much trouble and anxiety. But we chose to get married, and naturally there's going to be an attachment there. If there's no attachment, what kind of family life is it? Some attachment will be there. So even in Krishna consciousness, detachment means getting free from this very strong sense that this is my wife, this is my property, this is my family, and so on. And transferring that attachment to Krishna. We see that Parikshit Maharaj at the end, he puts aside his royal dress, he puts aside his kingdom, everything, because now he's going to focus on his main purpose in the few days that are left. So a straightforward answer, a blunt answer is detachment means detachment from family life. And that's why there's a Vanaprastha ashram. Eventually Prabhupada says sannyas is there. Sannyas is maybe in the picture. But we don't want to jump to sannyas because we don't want to prematurely accept that role in a, what's the word, in a jumping, abrupt sort of way that may not have steadiness and substance to it. So there's a provision that here's a time when we can develop detachment, increase our attachment for Krishna. We can purify our hearts. We can offload so much of what we think is ours, and we can redirect our lives in such a way that, okay, now handing things over, you take this, you take that. One of our god brother Shubha Vilas Prabhu is there. I've told this before. Still lives, I think, up in Canada, in the Toronto area. A successful businessman and substantial business. I would visit him from time to time. And at a certain point, he said that now I'm getting ready to hand over my business to my kids. And then I visited him again, and now I'm only going in for half a day, and the kids are, running things. Then the next time I'm only going in once a week. And then now I'm not going in anymore. So that was a business in which he was invested, we could say emotionally, or his mind was invested in the business. But he handed it over. Okay, it's not my business anymore. Ajahn Prabhu's done the same thing, handed his business over. And at a certain point you say it may do well, it may not do well, they may run it nicely, not so nicely, but I'm offloading that. So divesting oneself of one's previous duties, one's unnecessary necessities, and finally, at some point, of this connection, even between husband and wife. Loosening, there's a hard knot that's there, and loosening that knot. Loosening that knot, and we can say tightening our relationship with Krishna. Is that okay? And enough time is given for doing that. A big chunk is allotted for doing that, so that it's not abrupt, it's not shocking, it's not a cause for terrible anxieties and difficulties, but one gets to make progress. And those who are, if we want to accelerate, we can accelerate, but at least we're making progress. And if we can make faster progress, so much the better. But this is where we're going now. Then there was another, I saw down in the chat box, it seemed like there was another question. What's the difference, Venkatesh asks, between Daiva Varnashram and Varnashram? Daiva Varnashram, first of all, is Varnashram which is directed at Deva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's not just an external system without the purpose of satisfying Vishnu. Vishnu Aradyate Panta. So that's what makes it Daiva. Daiva means in relation to Deva, in relation to God, in relation to Krishna. So that's the first thing. And Asuri Varnashram means just in relationship to me and my own benefit, my own welfare, my own aspirations, my own profit. So often that kind of Varnashram has to do with one's bodily designations, one's upadhis. I'm a Brahmin, I'm a Kshatriya, I'm this, I'm that. And how am I Brahmin? Well, my father was a Brahmin, or my father was a Kshatriya. So one thinks very much in terms of the bodily designations and in terms of using one's position in the system of Varnashram to get advantages over others. So keeping others down because their birth is different, keeping myself up because my birth is different, and not dedicating myself toward the service of the Lord. That's the Asuri Varnashram. And the Daiva Varnashram is basically a supportive system for satisfying Krishna and making progress in devotional service.